When a routine airport check-in turns into a public relations nightmare, airline staff learn a powerful lesson. You never know who's standing in line, because true respect isn't reserved for first class. The morning at Dallas International Airport started like any other busy travel day. The terminals were packed with summer travelers, flight delays flashed across the monitors, and tempers were beginning to flare. Among the crowd stood Jasmine Crockett, dressed in a simple but elegant pantsuit, her government ID tucked into her passport holder. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Jasmine had been standing patiently at the priority check-in counter for nearly 20 minutes. Despite her reservation clearly showing her first-class status, the new airline employee, Kevin, seemed determined to make things difficult. His eyes darted nervously between her ID and his computer screen. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see any record of your priority status," Kevin said dismissively, not making eye contact. "You'll need to use the regular check-in line." He gestured toward the general queue where at least 50 people waited. Jasmine took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. "There must be some mistake. I've confirmed my status twice with your airline. Could you please check again?" Her voice remained calm and professional. Kevin's supervisor, Brenda, glanced over from the next counter, her expression hardening as she watched the interaction. Rather than offering assistance, she walked over with arms crossed. "Is there a problem here?" Brenda asked, her tone suggesting she had already decided who was causing the issue. "No problem at all," Jasmine replied. "Just a confusion with my booking that I'm sure can be resolved quickly." Brenda looked at Jasmine's ID with barely concealed skepticism. "Ma'am, if my colleague says you need to use the regular line, then that's where you need to go. We can't make exceptions." Jasmine maintained her dignified demeanor. "I understand your policies, but my ticket clearly indicates priority boarding. I'd appreciate if you could verify my reservation properly." The standoff was drawing attention from nearby travelers. Brenda's face flushed with embarrassment that quickly transformed into indignation. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but you need to move along now," Brenda said loudly, making a show of authority. "Security can escort you if necessary." Jasmine reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "That won't be necessary. I'll simply call my husband while I wait in the regular line. He's landing in Terminal B right now, and I'm sure he'd be interested to hear about this situation." Brenda rolled her eyes dramatically. "Go ahead and call whoever you want. Rules are rules." As Jasmine stepped away to make her call, she didn't notice the elderly gentleman who had been watching the entire exchange. He approached Kevin's counter and leaned in to speak quietly. "Do you know who that is?" the man asked, genuine concern in his voice. Kevin shrugged indifferently. "Just another passenger trying to cut the line." The elderly man shook his head slowly. "That's Representative Jasmine Crockett. She sits on the House Transportation Committee." Kevin's face drained of color as the realization hit him. He frantically began typing into his computer, while Brenda continued to watch Jasmine with narrowed eyes across the terminal. Meanwhile, Jasmine spoke calmly into her phone. "Yes, Michael, I'm at the check-in counter. There seems to be some confusion about my reservation." "No, don't worry yourself about it. Your flight just landed and you must be tired." "Yes, I'll wait for you in the main concourse." 15 minutes later, the atmosphere in the terminal shifted noticeably. A tall, distinguished man in a military dress uniform walked purposefully through the crowd, which seemed to part instinctively before him. The 4 stars on his shoulders gleamed under the airport lights. General Michael Crockett, recently appointed to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, spotted his wife immediately. The couple embraced warmly, their genuine affection evident to everyone watching. "Everything all right, Jasmine?" he asked, his deep voice carrying naturally despite his measured tone. "Just a misunderstanding about my ticket," she replied with a gentle smile. "Nothing to worry about." But General Crockett's experienced eyes had already assessed the situation. He noticed Brenda and Kevin watching them nervously from behind the counter. With his arm around his wife's shoulders, he guided her toward the check-in area. The airline's terminal manager, alerted by another staff member who recognized the general, rushed to intercept the couple before they reached the counter. "Representative Crockett, General Crockett," the manager said, slightly out of breath. "I'm Thomas Wilson, terminal manager. I understand there was some confusion with your check-in experience?" Jasmine maintained her gracious demeanor. "Yes, there seemed to be an issue verifying my priority status." The manager's smile was strained. "A terrible misunderstanding. Your status has been confirmed, and we've upgraded your seats as a small token of our apology." Behind them, Brenda's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Kevin looked like he might be sick. General Crockett spoke quietly. "Mr. Wilson, my wife and I understand that mistakes happen. We've both dedicated our careers to public service because we believe in treating all people with dignity and respect." General paused, his gaze moving briefly to Brenda and Kevin. "Perhaps your staff would benefit from additional training on customer service protocols. Not everyone carries ID that immediately identifies their position, but everyone deserves basic courtesy." The manager nodded vigorously. "Absolutely right, sir. I assure you this will be addressed immediately." As the Crocketts walked away with their boarding passes, escorted personally by the manager, Brenda and Kevin stood frozen behind the counter. The bustling airport continued its rhythmic chaos around them, but for these two employees, time seemed suspended in the heavy aftermath of realization. Kevin's hands trembled slightly as he processed their next passenger, his mind replaying the interaction on endless loop. "They're not going to report us, are they?" Kevin whispered, his earlier confidence completely evaporated, replaced by the cold sweat of professional anxiety. His eyes darted nervously toward the departing figures of Representative Crockett and her husband. The four gleaming stars on General Crockett's shoulders seemed to burn into Kevin's retinas even from this distance. Brenda didn't answer immediately. For the first time since the morning rush began, she was actually seeing, not just looking. She was watching Jasmine Crockett, noticing the graceful way she carried herself even under duress, the respectful nods other passengers offered as the couple passed, the subtle deference of the security staff who recognized them immediately. How had she missed these signs of someone accustomed to both authority and respect? More importantly, why had it mattered whether she recognized them or not? "I don't know if they'll report us," Brenda finally responded, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "But maybe they should." She straightened her uniform jacket and adjusted her name badge, suddenly acutely aware of how her own presentation affected her interactions. "Get back to work. We've got 50 more passengers to process before our shift ends." The manager, Thomas Wilson, returned 15 minutes later, his expression grave. Without a word, he gestured for another supervisor to take over the counter. "Both of you, my office now," he said quietly, the controlled calm in his voice more terrifying than any shouting could have been. The walk to the administrative offices stretched endlessly. Fellow staff members glanced curiously at the procession, their manager walking ahead with measured steps, followed by Brenda and Kevin, both looking as though they were marching to their own professional execution. The gleaming white hallway leading to the staff areas seemed to narrow with each step. Wilson's office was meticulously organized, airline industry awards and certificates covering one wall, family photos displayed prominently on his desk. He gestured to the two chairs opposite his desk, then closed the door with a soft click that somehow sounded like a prison gate slamming shut. "Sit down, please," he said, the politeness in his voice not matching the steel in his eyes. Kevin sank into the chair, feeling smaller by the second. Brenda sat ramrod straight, her jaw clenched in what might have been defiance or might have been an attempt to hold back tears of embarrassment. The The silence stretched between them as Wilson took his seat, folded his hands on the desk, and simply stared at them for what felt like hours. "Do you know who that was?" Wilson finally asked, his voice deceptively conversational. Kevin nodded miserably. "Representative Jasmine Crockett," he muttered, "and her husband is General Michael Crockett, Joint Chiefs of Staff." Wilson's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's correct. Representative Crockett sits on the House Transportation Committee that directly oversees airline regulations. General Crockett is not only a decorated military leader, but also happens to be personal friends with our CEO." He leaned forward slightly. "But that's not why I'm disappointed in your behavior today." Brenda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "We were following protocol for unverified priority passengers," she began, but her defense lacked her usual conviction. Wilson raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Were you really following protocol, Brenda? Because our protocol explicitly states that when there's a discrepancy in passenger status, we verify through the system before redirecting them." His gaze shifted to Kevin. "Did you actually check the system thoroughly, Kevin? Or did you just glance at the immediate screen?" Kevin's face flushed with shame. I only checked the priority flag on the initial screen," he admitted. "I didn't cross-reference with her reservation number or frequent flyer status." "And you, Brenda," Wilson continued, his calm demeanor unwavering but his disappointment palpable. "As a supervisor with 15 years of experience, did you verify anything at all before threatening a passenger with security removal?" Brenda's carefully constructed professional facade cracked slightly. "No, sir," she whispered. "I didn't." Wilson opened a drawer and pulled out 2 freshly printed placards, placing them on the desk between them. "We treat every passenger with dignity and respect," the card stated in bold, clear font. "These will be displayed at your workstations, starting tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Kevin asked, confused. Are we not fired?" Wilson's expression softened marginally. "No, Kevin, you're not fired. Not today, at least." He leaned back in his chair, considering his next words carefully. "Representative Crockett didn't ask for your termination. In fact, she specifically requested that you both receive additional training rather than disciplinary action." The revelation hung in the air between them. Brenda's eyes widened in disbelief. "She requested training for us? After how we treated her?" "That's correct," Wilson confirmed. "The general was rather explicit about their feelings on the matter. He said, and I'm quoting directly, 'Fire them, and they'll just take their biases to another employer. Teach them, and you might actually change something.'" Representative Crockett agreed with him. Kevin sank lower in his chair, shame washing over him in fresh waves. "We don't deserve that kindness," he said softly. Wilson nodded, acknowledging the truth in Kevin's words. "Perhaps not, but this isn't about what you deserve. This is about what our passengers deserve, which is a staff that treats them with basic human dignity, regardless of their status, appearance, or documentation." Wilson opened another drawer and withdrew 2 thick binders. "Starting tomorrow, you'll both be reassigned to the training department for the next 2 weeks. You'll complete our enhanced customer service program, our unconscious bias training, and our conflict resolution certification." He slid the binders across the desk. "And then you'll help redesign our training protocols for new employees based on what you've learned." Brenda stared at the binder, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for it. "You want us to help redesign training? After this?" "Precisely because of this," Wilson clarified. "The most powerful training tools we have are real-world examples of what happens when we fail our passengers." His expression hardened again. "Make no mistake, this is your one chance. Another incident like this, and you will be terminated immediately." As Brenda and Kevin absorbed this information, Wilson's phone buzzed. He glanced at it briefly. "The Crockett's flight has just taken off," he informed them. "They're on their way to Washington." where Representative Crockett will be attending a special session on transportation industry regulations. The significance of this statement wasn't lost on either employee. Their actions today could have repercussions far beyond their personal employment situations. Kevin clutched his binder like a lifeline. "I'll do better," he promised quietly. "I want to do better." Brenda nodded slowly, her usual defensive posture giving way to genuine reflection. "Me too," she agreed, then added with uncharacteristic humility, "Thank you for the second chance." Meanwhile, 30,000 feet above the ground, Jasmine and Michael Crockett settled into their first-class seats. The flight attendant had already brought them their preferred beverages without being asked. Jasmine's unsweetened iced tea, and Michael's sparkling water with lime, a small courtesy that hadn't gone unnoticed. Jasmine reached for her husband's hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "You didn't have to say anything back there, you know," she said softly, her voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the aircraft engines. "I could have handled it." General Crockett's features softened as he looked at his wife, his expression filled with the admiration that hadn't diminished in their 15 years of marriage. "I know you could have," he acknowledged, squeezing her hand gently. "You handle things beautifully every day, on the house floor and everywhere else. But sometimes, people need to be reminded that positions and titles aren't what command respect." His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "It's how we treat others when we think no one is watching." Jasmine leaned her head against his shoulder, allowing herself this small moment of vulnerability that she rarely showed in public. "Do you think they'll learn anything from this?" she wondered aloud. "Or will they just be more careful about checking IDs before they dismiss someone?" Michael considered this question with the same thoughtfulness he applied to military strategy. "Some will learn the wrong lesson," he admitted. "They'll just be more careful about who they mistreat. But others," he paused, remembering the genuine shame he'd seen in the young agent's eyes. "Others might actually understand the bigger picture, and sometimes that's all we can hope for, to reach the ones who are ready to grow." The plane reached its cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and Jasmine pulled out her tablet, opening a draft of the airline passenger rights legislation she had been working on for months. "I think I need to strengthen the training requirements section," she murmured, more to herself than to her husband. "Mandatory refreshers on customer service protocols and unconscious bias training, not just during onboarding but quarterly." Michael watched her work with quiet pride. This was the woman he had fallen in love with, turning personal affronts into policy improvements that would help thousands of others. "That's my girl," he said softly, always finding the opportunity in the obstacle. Back at the airport, as the afternoon shift changed over to evening, Brenda sat alone in the staff break room, her untouched coffee growing cold before her. The encounter had shaken something loose inside her, forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself and her interactions with passengers over the years. How many others had she dismissed? How many had she misjudged based on appearances or her own preconceptions? Kevin entered the break room, hesitating when he saw Brenda sitting alone. After a moment's deliberation, he approached her table. "Mind if I join you?" he asked tentatively. Brenda gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Free country," she said, but without her usual sharp edge. Kevin sat down, clutching his own coffee cup like a shield. "I've been thinking," he began cautiously, "about what happened today, about how quickly I judged her based on, well, nothing." "Really?" "Join the club," Brenda replied, finally taking a sip of her cold coffee and grimacing. 15 years I've been doing this job, and today was the first time I really saw myself through a passenger's eyes." She set down her cup with a soft clink. "I didn't like what I saw." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, two people united in the uncomfortable process of self-examination. Finally, Kevin spoke again, his voice firmer now, with new resolve. "I'm going to take that training seriously. All of it." Brenda nodded, meeting his eyes for the first time since the incident. "Me too, kid. Me too." She stood up, straightened her uniform, and squared her shoulders. "See you in training tomorrow." As she walked out, she passed the large windows overlooking the runway where planes took off and landed in a carefully orchestrated ballet of timing and protocol. Somewhere up there, Representative Jasmine Crockett and her husband were flying away from this incident, perhaps already focusing on more important matters. But here on the ground, the ripples of their brief encounter continued to spread, changing the course of at least 2 lives, and through them, potentially hundreds more. Brenda made a silent promise to herself and to the distant congressman she had misjudged so badly. The next passenger who stood before her counter would receive the dignity and respect that every human being deserved, regardless of who they were, or weren't. And perhaps in that small but significant change lay the true power of what had happened today. 6 months later, Jasmine Crockett stood before the House Transportation Committee, presenting new legislation on airline passenger rights. "Every American deserves dignity when they travel," she stated firmly. "Status should not determine decency. Basic respect is not a premium service." When asked what inspired her passionate advocacy on this particular issue, Representative Crockett merely smiled. "Let's just say I've seen both sides of the check-in counter," she replied, "and I believe we can do better." The bill passed with bipartisan support, establishing new training requirements and accountability measures for customer-facing airline staff. And at Dallas International Airport, Kevin, now a customer service trainer himself, used his own experience as a teaching moment for new employees. His most repeated phrase during orientation became something of a legend among the staff. "Remember, the person standing before you might not just be anybody, but even if they were just anybody, they still deserve to be treated like everybody who matters."